Hi, everyone. My name's Darren. I'm from the EDC in PolyU, and I'm going to talk about e-assessment in Hong Kong, current realities and future directions. I'll speak briefly about other institutions in Hong Kong. This is a PolyU-based project, but we've been looking at other institutions and what they've been doing in this field, and we've also been talking to other institutions, and I will share at some point some facts and figures from other institutions as well, but it's primarily a PolyU based thing. It's a project at PolyU, and the slide that I've just clicked from shows the project members that accompany me. Let me just move back to that actually. The slide that I've just clicked away from. So I'm Darren, and those are the other members of my project team and their colleagues from the center where I work. I think to understand where we are with the assessment and to understand where we're going, we need to understand where we've been, because that shapes our present and shapes our future as well. So prior to 2020 at PolyU, this is not across Hong Kong in general, but at PolyU, we had high LMS usage. About 90% of courses had a Blackboard site. Lots of materials were on the LMS, very few discussions were on the LMS. So many courses used the LMS as a repository, I believe. Face-to-face education was the unquestioned gold standard and probably still is for most teachers and learners. We had innovations at a departmental level and at an individual level, flipped learning, technology enhanced active learning, and so on. PolyU is quite active in the MOOC and SPOC arena. So we've had lots of MOOCs and SPOCs being used with on-campus face-to-face students. So a lot of blended learning has been happening at PolyU. We had a lecture capture VCMS system in place. So we have the infrastructure, so high LMS usage, video infrastructure, everything in place really. Limited e-assessment. Quizzes were used for midterms and continuous assessment, but that's about it. We had occasional uses of Respondus lockdown browser for invigilated on-campus exams. So online exams, but carried out in campus. Why online? We'll look at that later. It often gives a more authentic experience to actually do the exams online instead of using pen and paper. But at PolyU previously, this was done on campus. So groups of students turning up using PolyU laptops or PolyU computers in the computer center. So where are we at the end of 2020? Well, I mean, it's obviously been coming and going, but if we look at what's happened in 20, we've had courses being conducted online, fully online at various points, but still few discussions. The statistics show that all the courses have still got their Blackboard site. There's lots of video teaching going on, but there's still few discussions happening. So it seems that the online part has been synchronous more than asynchronous generally. Lectures have often been in fully online mode. It's been coming and going. You could call it hybrid flexible. I wouldn't go as far as calling it high flex. High flex is perhaps what I would consider to be the new gold standard, whereby students who are attending a face-to-face lecture or an online lecture, the same lecture, they're going to get given the same quality experience. I think that's hard. It's a big challenge to give the same experience, especially if teachers don't have much experience in actually planning classes this way. We've seen an explosion in the familiarity and the use of educational technologies. Learners and teachers have had to learn pretty quickly. All synchronous online learning has been captured and later shared with the students. So we're building up a huge repository of online lectures that have taken place. But if you consider ELTA, so e-learning, teaching and assessment, e-assessment, I still believe is the biggest challenge from those three areas. And remember what we've been seeing, which might be classified as emergency remote teaching, that's a stopgap. That's not an endpoint. We can't have emergency remote teaching as the new normal. Hopefully we can have high flex as the new normal at some point in the foreseeable future. But I think many teachers and students may disagree with my liking for the high flex mode. So what is the new normal? Previously, we were told that students wouldn't accept fully online teaching, that teachers wouldn't accept online teaching. And we were always worried about how could we replicate the face-to-face lecture as if the face-to-face lecture itself is a gold standard, and I don't believe it is. These questions are fine, but I think it's time to move on. We've delivered at PolyU and at other universities in Hong Kong and over the world an entire semester of online education. So can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Can students accept it? Yes, they can. But I think we should now, rather than considering those old questions, focus on delivering quality learning and teaching and assessment that leverages the technology and is fit for purpose, and particularly in updating our assessment practices. I believe the new normal is blended learning 2.0. Blended learning originally was the purposeful blending of the face-to-face and the online experience. I think now we have to consider as well the blending of the synchronous and the asynchronous online learning. So for those moments when face-to-face learning is not possible, excuse me, the blend is going to come with synchronous and asynchronous. And as we know, assessment drives learning, which is a shame because our students have seen assessment practices change mid-semester and teaching practices change as well. Now, I've put to change it mid-semester is probably acceptable as an emergency reaction during a pandemic. I think it's definitely acceptable, but we can't keep on using that excuse. So moving forward, the new normal has to have planning for online learning, teaching, assessment, rather than keeping it up our sleeve in case of emergencies, I think. So for the rest of my project, for the rest of my presentation, rather, I'm going to give you a quick background into the project that I've been talking about with the 5 members that I showed you at the beginning. I'm going to quickly take a snapshot of eLTA in Hong Kong as of late 2020 in terms of technologies. What the papers say refers to one paper I'm going to talk about, a literature review that we used in our literature review for this project. And it gives some nice background about what teachers and learners think about online learning, teaching and assessment. Summer in the City 2020 refers to online proctored exams that we did at PolyU, and this was the first time that we've carried out online proctored exams. I believe other institutions in Hong Kong were in the same position. So summer 2020 has changed everything, basically. I'm going to present a model for classifying e-assessment interventions, and then I'll apply that model to 3 examples of e-assessment that I'm going to share with you. We'll talk about future directions and challenges and a call for collaboration as well at the end. So this is a TDG funded 2-year initiative, the project of e-assessment at PolyU. We've got colleagues from our EDC, plus academic staff, plus local and international benchmarking. And the main deliverables for this 2-year project are to produce a repository. I don't like the word repository, but a set of e-assessment approaches, tools and strategies for formative and summative assessment that is fit for purpose and can be used by teachers, as I say, not just as an emergency response, but in terms of planning. So assessment leads learning. We can plan new types of assessment to lead new types of learning. Current experiences of 2020, particularly the summer, have shown us, the project members, that we really need to consider 2 directions or 2 strands. One is online proctored examinations, which I'll talk about first later, and the other is alternative forms of e-assessment, such as continuous assessment, project work, live or non-live presentations, and so on. These are early days in the project. This is very much a discussion paper today, and it's very much a work in progress. I hope to present at eLFA next year with a lot more solid information. The project's only been going a couple of months, although our work over the summer is kind of part of the project, although it predates it very slightly. Snapshot as of late 2020, 3 questions I asked to colleagues in 5 sister universities, and PolyU is mentioned there as well. What technology is used for lecture capture? Panopto seems to win at the moment in Hong Kong, although Echo 360 is also mentioned. PolyU uses Panopto. What is used for conducting synchronous and synchronous online sessions? PolyU originally started with Blackboard Collaborate, our LMS's Blackboard. During the campus closures due to the pandemic, MS Teams was the next tool that we promoted. And finally, there was a lot of clamor for Zoom, if you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic. So we also provided Zoom. PolyU was very flexible. Other institutions using similar combinations of tools as well. And what is used for online proctored examinations? And this is a big question. We'd never done online proctored examinations before at PolyU, and we started doing them this summer. And the way that we set it up was Blackboard was being used as the main tool for the assessment, whether that be like multiple choice quizzes or whether it was used for submitting written assignments. We had a separate device, which was a mobile phone running Zoom for invigilation purposes. And there was actually a 3rd device that students needed if they were doing paper-based online proctored assessment as well. Some assessments needed the use of pen and paper. So for those students, they needed a 3rd device to actually take a picture of what they'd been working on and then submit. 3 devices is hard. It's a big call for students to use that. Even 2 devices is tricky to coordinate. What do the papers, what do the studies say about online assessment. I looked at one great paper, I looked at many papers, but the one I'm going to refer to is a meta-analysis of 40 papers. And these are my 4 main takeaways from that particular paper. I'm doing it in quotation. Today, students prefer online examinations compared to paper. So 68% of students preferred online examinations compared to paper examinations. I've heard various things that differ from this wildly at PolyU, but this was a meta-analysis of multiple papers, and this was their conclusion. Secondly, students believe online examination allows a more authentic assessment experience. Let's face it, writing something with pen and paper is possibly the least authentic we can be. Very few people actually do that in their studies, in their work, in their profession. It doesn't happen. So the idea of being able to use technology means that you can use a spreadsheet and do spreadsheet calculations. It means you can use other technologies, and it simply means as well you can type, and many of us type faster and better than we write. The majority of students perceive that the online examination environment makes it easier to cheat. I don't know if that correlates with the previous one, so students like it because it's easier to cheat. That's a joke. I'm sure that's not the reason. The reasons I've said are given before. It's a more authentic experience. But students do acknowledge that it's easier to cheat online. And the fourth takeaway, academics certainly acknowledge that it's easier to cheat online. Academic integrity is the main concern of academics. The reliability of the technology is the second most critical concern that academics have. No surprises there. So as I said, summer in the city, we did online proctored exams at PolyU for the first time in our history, and I believe other institutions in Hong Kong and across the world did the same. As I said before, Blackboard plus Zoom on a mobile phone and possibly a third device for paper-based submissions. There was much discussion about how we were going to organize this. We're seeing today Zoom with the number of screens that you can see, I think being limited to 49. So it's quite a good tool for viewing many people at once. We decided on a ratio of 1 to 15 for closed book exams and 1 to 30, I believe, for open book exams. All of these exams switched. Okay, as I say, we were not using online proctored exams before. So these were all remedial, for want of a better word. This was plan B. All of these exams were a plan B. Multiple written guidelines and videos were produced by ITS, by AR, and by ourselves in EDC. And additionally, each teacher was assigned an EDC colleague. So every teacher got one colleague specifically to help them, to guide them, to troubleshoot if needed. It has to be said, I was expecting a deluge of inquiries. We didn't get a deluge of inquiries. We got a lot of inquiries, but not a deluge. It was all very, very manageable. And I think the PolyU teachers and students did a fantastic job to actually make it happen. At the end of the exam period, the EDC colleagues reached out to teachers and asked them to share we asked them to share their experience, what had happened. 67% said the exams went smoothly, 32% said they did not go smoothly. So a bit of a relief. And for the 32 that didn't go smoothly, the 32%, there were always solutions found. There was no disaster, the wheels stayed on. We then did a discourse analysis of the open response answers that the teachers gave us in the survey. And the following categories emerged from the most occurrences to the least. So student mishaps or incidents was the most popular category. Emergency measures taken by departments next. We've got academic integrity issues and technical issues. So no real surprise. Our teachers experienced problems in areas that they would have predicted that we would have problems. As I said, this was the entire university summer program switching to online exams like that, really, with very little notice given. Ooh, sorry. And some selected comments from teachers that reported issues. So students pressing the submit button too soon, stability problems, departments having to allow extra time for identity checks. So if you have an exam with 200 students, these need to be checked on Zoom, student by student, before the exam actually starts. So this was a huge process. Departments suggested that the students would use webcams rather than an extra device. It's hard to organize these things. And the webcam was considered too permanent on most computers. It sits there and wouldn't give like an environmental view, and so on and so forth. So these were the issues identified. This was version 1. Version 2 is happening now. And in version 2, many of the things are similar. The one big change I'm going to report for what's happening at PolyU now is that all the teachers are using a webcam. All the students have been told to use a webcam, and not the built-in webcam either, a webcam with a cable so that the webcam can be moved around and still give the side view. So that's the one big change that's been happened. So for students who need to have the device to take a photo of paperwork, that's going to be their phone. We've still got the ratio of 1:15 as well. So that's what's happened so far, and that's what's happening at the moment across the university, across PolyU. Now, for our project, we need to identify innovations, we need to work with teachers, we need to help them build new assessment practices. And one way of categorizing this is using the Sowmya model, which I've used before on other projects. And Dr. Matthew Hillier, an Australian academic who works a lot in the e-assessment field, recommends the use of this model as well. The 4 stages, so substitution, the lowest level of a change. So basically all of our exams that we did online proctored were originally face-to-face exams. So bang, substitution. Technology literally substitutes the face-to-face experience. You next have augmentation, then modification, then redefinition. So it's building up the hierarchy to where at the top, these are new methods for assessing students, new directions to take. Yeah, I'm going to share 3 examples with you, and I'm mindful of the time. The first example I'm going to share beyond online proctored exams was carried out by our English Language Centre. So this is an assessment this semester, was originally an in-class presentation with Q&A in front of a student audience. The modified assessment is going to be an asynchronous video submission, and they considered synchronous assessment but decided not to use it because of technical and connection issues. So it's gone from an in-class to a video submission of a presentation. Advantages: students can produce better work. It frees up class time for input and practice. Students have a copy of the file for double marking. There are challenges that students might practice too much, so it's stilted, it's not natural, and some technical issues. A possible modification that's been included here is have a live Q&A after the video submission. So that would be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous assessment. I've highlighted it in green because my next example actually did just that, combined synchronous and asynchronous. So my second example is from management and marketing. This was a 2-part thing. We had the group presentation with QA in front of a teacher, that's the original assessment, and a peer evaluation within the teams, and that was all done by paper. The modified assessment has an asynchronous group video presentation and a synchronous Q&A session, a live Q&A session. So this uses one of the techniques that was suggested by the previous team. Advantages of asynchronous video submission I've already stated. Advantages of synchronous Q&A, it adds spontaneity. It's a good time for teacher to guide students. Students have to respond quickly on their feet. So if we're thinking of the classification before, the other assessment was definitely augmentation. This one is augmentation and maybe a little more. We're starting to think about new techniques, starting to try new things that are slightly different from the face-to-face version of the assessment. Let me go to my third assessment, and this is from Rehabilitation Sciences. Originally, it was a face-to-face practical test and a presentation, and that changes to an asynchronous Blackboard assignment with students submitting video and a written account, and then a synchronous Microsoft Teams session for students to present, discuss, and get feedback. This, I think, is the most fully fleshed out, the most fully fledged version of assessment that we've seen. The other 2 I showed you were definitely augmentation on the Sowmya scale. I think this one is modification. It's getting there, it's getting higher. But two things that the teacher noted is that ILOs need to be adjusted when learning and teaching modes change. And also that for professional bodies, they need direction. If professional bodies insist on face-to-face, then that's very difficult to carry out during a pandemic. I'm running out of time.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. But...
Yeah, let me just say for the final direction is we need to do more, we need to get more examples, but we also need to consider modifying ILOs. We cannot keep ILOs the same if the course and the assessment changes. And if I take you to that, I would like to hear from other departments and universities and colleagues as well. So if you're carrying out e-assessment and you'd like to get in contact, please contact me. Carmen, sorry about